Hi, Oliver.
Hi, Fadi.
Yes. Hi, Ramin.
Hey, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are.
Thanks. Good morning to you. So let me share my screen and hi, Kara.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Trying to figure this daylight saving time thing. I am even more confused now when I try to compare.
Yeah, it's a very awkward week.
Maybe we should cancel these meetings that fall between, that no man's land or whatever it's called.
I think that's a very good policy, just no meetings for the week. I mean, how I've seen it done in other meetups is that it just rolls forward. And so the people who have shifted time zone, if they can make it, they can make it. And same for the people who haven't yet gone through daylight savings. Otherwise, it is very hard just because some people have this fall and in a new time during their day, and they might have other things.
Yeah, because like if you remember, Kara, when I asked like this 16 UTC was shown as 16 for us or something like that. But when I checked this time is website, it still shows 5 p.m. for us for 14th or 18th of March. But yeah, we'll talk about that when we come to the topic later.
That is the case. Something weird like that happens in the UK because London time isn't, sometimes it's UTC and sometimes it's not. England might be even weirder.
Yeah, but let's.
Yeah, we have BST in summer, British Summer Time, which is UTC +1.
Yeah, we have topic for that, so we can start then. Thanks everyone for joining, and if you haven't done it, please record your participation. And here is the agenda. So as usual, we will start with action item review. We have few of those, and I think we will be able to close at least half of them, which is always good.
Fatih,
and then we will, yeah.
Are you recording? I'm being told that I need to ask permission of the host, and it might be because I'm still using the Jenkins Zoom, so it may not recognize me.
I see blinking red dot here. I'm not host, so I can't do anything, but I think it is automatically recorded, isn't it?
Perfect. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
You see that red dot as well, yeah? Somewhere cloud record something.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it's being recorded.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So once we are done with action item review, we will talk about daylight saving time changes because like US switches makes the change 14th of March and Europe makes the change on 28th of March, and then the next meeting falls in between, which messes the calendars up. And then we will give a heads up on upcoming discussion with Dina Portman, which will take place on March 18th. And then we will look at policy-driven CI/CD document because I've seen Tracer Egan added some notes about Deploy Hub and Deploy Hub Pro and Ortelius. I also put some notes about eBay, Ericsson, and Zool's take of policy based on the meeting recording. And then we will revisit standardized metadata. This work seems to have stalled a bit, so it would be good to bump the topic up. And then we will have a presentation from Oliver on Project Piper. And then I don't know who added the topic, but CDCon. So yeah, that's a good reminder. Maybe we can take that first before the presentation, because it may be difficult to come to that topic based on how long the presentation is. So let's start with action items. So Dave Sudia, I don't see him in the meeting, and as we all may remember, he had some changes in his employment, so he may not be able to contribute as much until those things are sorted out. And Steve, you volunteered to help with the artifact metadata thing, so I'm wondering if we should keep this action item open and you just,
Yeah, I'm behind on that, so just keep me on it.
Okay, so I move that to you then, Steve.
Yep.
Okay. So Ortelius, Steve and Tracy to help bring Ortelius standardized metadata as example in new report. I think we can add this to the previous action item because you already volunteered for artifact metadata. So you do it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Like. Yeah.
Like you said, we did update some of one of the documents to reference Ortelius and Deploy Hub. I can't remember which document it was, but we did start on some of that updates.
Yeah, it's policy. I think Tracy.
That's right. That was on the policy side.
Yeah, she put a lot of good information there, which we'll quickly look at it. Thanks, Steve. The next action item is on Tracy Miranda, and she already got Kara and me in touch with Dina Grace Portman about the discussion on 4 Keys project and how we can collaborate on common things, because 4 Keys project is about measuring delivery performance, and that requires some way of collecting all these metrics, which brings us back to metadata and perhaps events topics back. So this discussion and potential collaboration could be valuable for both CDF 6M projects and 4 Keys project. And she will join to our meeting on March 18th. So we have a topic about that. I already told it. So we close the action item. I created a new document on policy-driven CI/CD and sent that mail. I think it was Monday. So that action item is done. Tracy Reagan included the information about policy on the document from Ortelius and Deploy Hub. So closing that one. The next action item is on you, and Andrea and Christy included some information in the policy document, so we can close this action item if you think she captured the conditionals you mentioned, or we can keep it open, up to you.
I've not looked at it, but sorry about that. But if Christy added it, I think it should be fine.
Okay, then I close it. But I looked at what she added, and she didn't use the word conditionals. That's why I asked this. So maybe we close this action item and you look at it. If like conditionals is something used by technical community, it would make sense to add that keyword in the document so we can, translate the things between different projects.
Okay.
And the next action item is about providing codes for CDF SIG events announcement. And I already shared the link to document with Emil, Andrea, and Kara. I don't know if you took this into account when you had a discussion with, I don't remember the name of the lady. So that document is there. You can close this action item. I was supposed to add user project input to policy document based on the discussions, which I did, which we will look at it when the topic comes. So closing this one. And then Project Piper to the agenda, that was added as well, and you'll have the presentation today. So we closed almost all the action items, which is always great, like this is amazing. So thanks everyone for doing all these things. Let's move to the tricky topic, daylight saving time changes. So as I mentioned at the beginning, US makes the change on March 14th. I think it is next weekend. And then Europe makes the change on March 28th. And our meeting on March 18th falls in between. And that confuses people. At least I'm very confused, like what time we should have the meeting. So according to our usual time, 16 UTC, it is 9 a.m. for Pacific time and 5 p.m. for Central European time. I'm not sure if this is correct. So what should we do for the next meeting?
Those who are in the meeting now can follow the link I pasted to see what their time zone will be, what their time will be on 18th of March.
Okay, let me open
So I
that
guess that
link.
confusion could at least be lifted.
Okay, for us it will be 4 p.m. in
Yeah.
Central European time.
4 p.m. will be 5 p.m. in Sweden.
Oh, sorry, 5 p.m. Yes,
Yeah.
you are right. Yeah. Ramin, you are in Pacific time zone, yeah? Or
That is correct.
and what time this link shows for you?
Well, let me go there and see what it does.
So I can write the times on the document.
It says 4 p.m. on Thursday, March 18th.
On the next line, the line
I'm sorry,
under that.
okay, 9 a.m. Yeah,
Okay,
And for me, it's 10 a.m. because I'm in Mountain. So that time works for me.
10 a.m. for Mountain time. And Jeremy, I think you are in Mountain or Central?
Yeah.
So it is 10 a.m.
Yeah,
for you as well.
Eastern America's here.
East Coast, you mean?
Yep.
And is it like 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. for you?
Right. Well, I usually go by UTC, so it's a little after 11 local time here right now.
Okay. So somewhere, let me put that. And then for Kara, it will be 3 p.m. then for you in UK.
No, actually, I'm 3 would be fine for me, so it doesn't matter. But I'm actually saying
Okay.
it will be 4. But in any case,
Or
I'm flexible on it. It does not matter for me.
then I put this like this. I hope this is right. So if this is wrong, please update correct, because I will send a separate reminder saying that daylight saving time happens and it is 4 p.m. UTC as usual, but check your time on this link. Let me put this link. Thanks, Emil, for that.
Yeah, and the 11 a.m. should be 12 a.m.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
or 12 noon instead of
Okay.
morning.
No. So done. Let's see how many people will join, because why I am making this a big deal, because we asked Dina to join our next meeting and I want to ensure she joins the meeting on the right time rather than joining the meeting at the wrong time and finding no one.
Right.
Why. So that is sorted out then. CDCon, who added this topic?
I put that in there. The hard deadline is this Friday, the 5th of March. So it would be great to have lots of topics and talks on interoperability with all of your projects. But in general, I mean, it is very good for you to submit talks to CDCon, but it should be excellent. And there's a couple really interesting tracks. So do have a look at the website. Thank you for putting that in there, Betsy, and get your talk submissions in.
So end of day
Can you
tomorrow.
post
So
the website in chat, please?
Yes. So it's middle of the night, like tomorrow Pacific time, 12 p.m. or 11:59 p.m. or something. So we have little more than 1 day to get the proposals in. Thanks for reminder, Kara. I forgotten about that because I already sent my proposal for early bird and I failed. I couldn't make it to early bird. That's why I remember. Okay. So the next topic is the meeting with Dina Portman. So Portman from Google. Let me open this project. So she is working with the 4Keys project. And as you read the project description background, they are working on identifying 4 key metrics to indicate performance of software development team. So, and it says 4 keys allows you to collect data from your development environment, such as GitHub, GitLab, and compiles it into a dashboard displaying these key metrics. As we have been discussing within our group's meetings, like this is one of the things we are also talking about, how to collect these metrics. And when Tracy Miranda suggested that we should have a discussion with Dina to find opportunities to collaborate in this area, it was pretty good to hear because this topic has also end user aspect. There is a topic in end user council about measuring DevOps success. So it's like CDF end user council is looking at that thing, and 4Keys project is looking at similar thing. And we are also looking at how we can establish some kind of interoperability in domain to make these things easier. So this discussion is to talk about those things and find opportunities to collaborate further. So please join to the next meeting, and she will present 4Keys in more details, like 10 to 20 minutes presentation maybe, followed up by discussion, and then we see where we end up based on that discussion. Perhaps we should send a separate mail for this as well, to talk mail list, MLOps maybe, and other mail lists, so people can join to this meeting, because it is more than interoperability, to be honest. So this is just a heads up. Let me action.
I think that's a good point, that we should be spreading, encouraging people from other SIGs and groups to join. I've encouraged the Jenkins Cloud Native SIG to attend, and there's been a lot of interest. So in your own projects and other groups and meetings that you go to, you might want to tell people about it. It's a very interesting project, the 4Keys.
Yeah. So thanks for doing that, Kara. Maybe Andrea, you are involved in Tekton community. Yeah, I am not sure if if it makes sense to get people's attention to this discussion, because her talk was great, and now we have a chance to have a conversation with her. So
yeah, I had an initial chat with the rest of the governing board, but not much happened from it yet. I guess it's, but it's definitely an interesting area. So I think one of the points in Dina's presentation last year was the difficulty of creating different events from Tekton, because there is no kind of abstraction there about what a pipeline being a deployment or specific item there. So I think that the work that we're doing in the event SIG might help there. And I will try to keep a close loop between the work that we're doing in that group and Tekton to make sure that everything we define there is available on Tekton's side.
thanks, Andrea. Okay. So mails will be sent to these mail lists. The next topic is policy-driven CI/CD. Let me open that document. So now, do we have Tracy Regan? No. Steve, you want to summarize what Tracy contributed to policy document, or?
Yeah. So let me just get this right. So some of the things that we were looking at a high level were around license policy enforcement, CVE enforcement, and configuration policy enforcement. So the first two are pretty obvious. You know, are there any licenses or CVEs that should prevent us from moving forward with a deployment of a particular version of an application? And then like on the configuration side, it is more around the configuration of where we're going to, matching up with what is needed. So a needs versus have policy are some of the things that we're looking at on that front. So like an example is what we're requesting coming forward on a configuration basis. You know, are there enough nodes or backing the pods, or you know, do we need more compared to what is being asked for? So that's kind of the thought process around on the Ortelia side. And then on the Deploy Hub Pro side, we'd be looking at hooking into authorization policy, who can do what and where, as part of that process. And then in Deploy Hub, we do have a concept of approvals and approval gates. And that would be around who can approve, who can use an approved version of a component or an application. So this has come about where you look at teams that or organizations that have a group, like an open source group, that they'll go through it and say that this is a good, let's say MongoDB, this specific version is a good version to use, and that goes on their approved list as part of that process. So that'd be something that we would be looking at as another policy. And then again, the license CVE policy and the configuration policy are carried forward from the Ortelia side. And then one of the things that we put out there, we don't know how easy it's going to be to do from a policy perspective, but trying to the duplicate component policy, which we would try to enforce reuse instead of copying of code as part of that level. And then finally, the SOL SLI, which would hook into more of the telemetry that we're getting from the clusters themselves, the runtime environment, and how we should react to what's happening at that level. So that's kind of a high level of what we saw from a policy standpoint for both Ortelius and Deploy Hub.
Thanks, Steve. I have a question actually. You know, when we were talking about policy topic during previous meetings, few policy engines or policy frameworks were mentioned, like Open Policy Agent and Open Network Automation Platform policy framework. Do you use something like that, an external component to enforce policies, or like write policies as code or something like that? Because like Spinnaker uses Open Policy Agent, and what Ortelius uses?
Right now, we do not have any policy hooks. So we're currently not using any policy agent per se, but this is what we would be envisioning if we were to hook in something like Open Policy Agent in the process. So that's one of the things that we have to look at as a next step, is to figure out how we are able to enforce these policies that we're looking to do.
Okay. Any questions to Steve about Ortelius and or Deploy Hub Pro policy approach?
What is the link to this document you're looking at? I'm on the CD Foundation GitHub org, and I see a doc there, but it's all TBD.
Yeah, I haven't pushed the latest version. Let me put the link to chat, Ramin. Sorry for that.
That's okay.
Tecton, Andrea, this is the part Christy included. So yeah, you can take a look at it to see if you have anything to add there.
Yeah,
and then
yeah, sure.
My action item was about bringing the discussion from last meeting to this document. So I brought Zool pieces here, and Jeremy, if you can take a look at it to see if I described what you summarized during the meeting captures, or if I was able to capture what you described.
Which document is that again?
It is, you don't use Zoom, so you can't see the link. But I sent the link to SIG Interoperability mail list as well. This Monday,
Okay,
I think you can, yeah.
I'll pull that up, thanks.
Because I probably couldn't capture everything you described there. I listened a few times, but I failed to reflect the notes.
Yep, no, that's fine. That's I'm happy to double check that.
Yeah. So before we move to users, like Kara, Jenkins, as I mentioned to you like a few weeks ago, Jenkins has a plugin, I think CloudBees plugin. It is not an open source plugin, and I didn't include that explicitly because I didn't want to, misrepresent what plugin does. So if you could like help putting Jenkins information here or ask your colleagues.
Yes, can I also, we're interested in what the Jenkins open source project has, and in addition, it would be good to put the information for the CloudBees product.
Yeah, because when I Googled Jenkins policy,
No, I'm just asking from our point of view. We're discussing, and I can see why we would, but we're discussing both the open source and the paid products. Yeah,
I think both should be good. Both would be good to have. So we see like how the communities approach this, how the offerings, like enterprise versions. Yeah, if you could do that.
Okay. I will take that action item.
Yeah, let me add that action item before we forget. Okay. So Spinnaker, someone already put that. Was it Christy last week? Spinnaker uses, or Armory flavor of Spinnaker supports OPA, and she put that link there. So I will add some text here based on the document there, and I will reach out to Cameron to check if what we put there reflects the reality to reach. Okay. And then when it comes to users, so Ramin, I, again, similar to what I did with Zool, I tried to extract what you summarized during the previous meeting. I included it in the document, so please correct what I put there. I include like badges and central system handing out badges, and that actually enforces which applications could go to which environments, like staging, pre-production, and production. So if you could verify what I put there, that would be good.
Sure, I'll take a look. Yeah.
And same thing for you, Emil. I tried to put confidence levels from Ericsson there, so please check that and update as you see fit.
Sure. Just FYI, the approach we've taken is to decouple policy enforcement away from continuous delivery workflow engine, so that the CD engine does what it does. It's going to still go to the next step, go to the next phase, and only if things fail in between, it gets signaled. It itself does not have any sort of policy has not been written into the CD engine. It's been it's been enforced by other things, and which then can signal the CD workflow to stop.
So you can see this diagram, yeah, I am showing. I think this is something like what you described, like you have this CI/CD pipeline technology or like tools, but you have an external system who actually drives policy, enforces policy stuff.
Yes.
Okay, so it is pretty similar to our use case. Like as Emil mentioned during the previous meeting, we use events, and events actually contain the metadata about like certain confidence levels or badges in your context. So I think we have some common thing surfacing here. Spinnaker uses Open Policy Agent as an external system and behaves accordingly rather than keeping the policy built into the pipeline technology itself. Okay. So, Ramin, can you add that sentence while you are on the document in eBay chapter on the document? Because it's a critical point to highlight. External system doing that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Like what you just summarized, if you can add that to the policy document.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I said central system, but yeah, you described much better than me. Like this decoupling policy. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, and then I started adding some terminology things like eBay calls stuff badges and policies are enforced based on badges, and Ericsson has confidence levels. Again, they are used to, you know, enforce policies like if you can deploy a certain application with a certain confidence level to this environment or that environment. And then we can continue mapping the terms from the projects like Tecton, Spinnaker, Jenkins, Zool, and so on. And that gives us at least some way to tie these efforts together, saying everybody is doing something similar and these are what they are called in those projects. And this is their approach, either built into the pipeline technology itself or handled by external systems. So any other opinion about the policy topic? Okay, please feel free to update the document. It is out there, and I will push this version to the repo as well, so people can find it there too. I think we have something here because like everybody seems to be doing similar things, calling themselves differently, calling those things differently, and if we can find a way to bring these things together, that would help us in future as well. So moving to the next topic, standardized metadata. So this is the HackMD document, and as I mentioned when we were talking about agenda, this work has not been progressing because of perhaps Dave's changes in circumstances. Steve, thank you for adding commit thing here. I think that is good enough information to start with, and if we could get artifact in place as well, that would help. And then we can talk with Dina as well, because they are looking at Git information from Git, and they are probably looking at information from artifact repositories. So we can at least point her to this work, saying that this is what we started. Does it make sense to continue with this? What else we should look, and so on, to have the conversation. Okay, that was a reminder about the situation with standardized metadata work. Anyone wants to say anything about the topic? Okay, so now we come to you, Oliver. I stop sharing and you can take over.
Okay, just sharing. Let me know when you can see the screen.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, then let me introduce you to Piper, which is an open source project since, I believe, end of 2017, where we open sourced it. We started as an inner source project within SAP. Today, it's essentially both. We have very SAP specific aspects, which are still maintained as an inner source project, but the majority of aspects is part of the open source project, and we are probably the biggest user also of this open source project within our development organizations. Just some fun facts for SAP. If you like, you can read through it. In past meetings, there was a question about the scope, and in the end, we talked within SAP about more than 30,000 developers working on many different projects, different acquisitions, a lot of heterogeneity. Now, what is Piper? I tend to say it's shared coded knowledge or shared codified knowledge, which is ready to use for a development team. On the top, we essentially provide what we call ready-made pipelines. That's a continuous delivery pipeline or even continuous deployment pipeline from code commit to production deploy. This consists of several steps which come out of the Piper step library. The steps, they are responsible for interacting with the various systems you want to have in the flow. It starts with versioning an artifact. We'll look into that in a minute. Building, publishing to some artifact repository, performing security scanning, open source scanning, performance tests, and so on. And those system connections, this knowledge about how to integrate with these kind of systems is basically put into these Piper step library. Underneath, there's a common configuration layer. That's we'll see that in a minute as well. Essentially a YAML file containing configuration for the individual steps and also for the complete pipeline. Now, if you want to get started, it's essentially 4 lines of code, which you need to put into your repository, 2 files. Main focus is Jenkins, but we'll come to that also a bit later. Teams using Jenkins, there's a Jenkins library, which is included into a Jenkins file, and then the pipeline is executed. Therefore, this Jenkins file is can be just copied over. SAP internally, we by now even have an onboarding service, onboarding portal, which asks some questions, guides you through what type of project and so on, and it will create a repository and put these kind of files plus the configuration in there. Simplest way, you just define a build tool, what you want to use. You see in the screenshot above the various stages where a complete pipeline can run through. There's pull request voting, that's the simplest, getting started, building, unit testing, integration testing, acceptance, security, performance, until we reach a promotion. Now, very important, we do have a separation of the pipeline logic and the configuration. The pipeline script is, I showed, it's just essentially these 2 lines of code are provided centrally. They are provided within Project Piper. That means we allow for central innovation. People can consume new things without doing anything, since most of the teams just use the master branch of the project, and with that, they just consume what comes in. And by abstracting these things away, we dramatically reduce cognitive load on team side. On the other side, there's this team-owned configuration. I said you have various configuration layers. You can configure on a step level. Here you see the example of the versioning. You can configure on a stage layer, or even for the complete pipeline, certain things. What's possible for teams as well is that they can break out of the predefined stages, extend them, replace them, prepone have something before the stage, after the stage, or completely override the stage. That's in the hand of the teams. Now, let's have a quick look at the configuration. It's a layered configuration. We have defaults which come with Piper, with the library itself, with step configuration defaults, configuration details for basically overall, generally, everything you run. Comes in very handy if you have, like we in the company, certain instances of a scanning tool with a dedicated URL. We can just put that into the company default, and no team needs to take care of it any longer. Then teams can also provide custom defaults, right? That means let's share defaults across various repositories or across various projects, where they can prepare centrally, typically by one central team in this area, to have certain defaults on top of the company defaults. And then, oops, wrong direction. The teams have in their hands what they configure. They can again override what's coming in. And the last resort is you can just directly parameterize the steps, which we typically do not recommend, because then a pipeline script will not really be reusable, since you have configuration in your pipeline script. Let's quickly look into the automatic versioning. I think that's a topic which is often of interest. We have one step doing the automatic versioning and essentially hiding away the different aspects of the build tools, like versioning for NPM, versioning for Maven, versioning for Go, and so on. Right? And the only thing a team needs to do is tell the build tool and maybe add some specifics for the versioning. The default for the versioning is a versioning pattern with major, minor patch, timestamp, and a full commit ID. If your team doesn't want to have this, you can go with a short commit ID. But there's also an option to say we have a versioning type which we call library, and then we just have a assembler version, major, minor patch. That's all the team needs to do. Not caring about the nitty-gritty details of how to read a version out of a POM XML file, writing it back, and so on. Now, I mentioned we essentially started with Jenkins. We're a pretty big Jenkins shop, I guess, within SAP, but the world is evolving with continuous delivery foundation and other things, right? We see GitHub Actions taking traction. There's Tecton, and there's various tools. I mentioned at SAP we're pretty heterogeneous. That means you find various systems within the company. Jenkins being still the majority, I would say, but other things really getting traction. Now, how do we address that? We call it agnostic continuous delivery. We do have this configuration file. I give you now an example, again with the build tool, npm, some vault configuration for credentials, since we want to have also credentials in a place which can be reused, not in the Jenkins credential store, but somewhere where it can be reused. We still have some Jenkins stuff in there for people who are on Jenkins to essentially access this vault instance. Now, looking at Jenkins, if you're familiar with Jenkins, scripted pipeline in this case, in order to do a versioning of an artifact which you check out, it's basically these lines of code, right? You empty your workspace just to be safe, check out the repository, and do the versioning. How the versioning is done, if it's major, minor patch, what have you, it's just written in the config file. Therefore, you can also across teams in a certain area just move that over if you wish. If you now see the need to move to another orchestrator system, or maybe you want to first test it locally, you can just do it via shell. You can call Piper, you can set the vault credentials, you can clone the repository and run Piper artifact prepare version. And it executes on the same configuration file, does the same thing. If we now go look at GitHub Actions, there's a Piper GitHub action available. Same thing, check out, use the action with the command artifact prepare version, and it is the same version. Therefore, you can really switch, pick and choose orchestrator systems depending on your demand, and also support migration paths. Tekton, not yet done, to come. Maybe we can also have a chat afterwards for those colleagues being involved in Tekton, how we could best achieve that. And then to close, what's next? I showed you essentially the agnostic pipeline, agnostic step library, that we can run the library steps on various systems, even locally. The thing we want to go to is having the agnostic ready-made pipelines, like we have on Jenkins. Really an orchestrator independent pipeline to allow teams to move. Prerequisites we see is we want to have centrally provided pipeline flow, and also provide centrally those kind of changes, and do not miss out on the autonomy of the teams and allow them to extend, replace certain stages in certain areas of the pipeline. On the other side, a team should not have a mandatory action in order to be able to consume something new. For sure, in many cases, some configuration requirement will appear. But for the typical flow logic of the pipeline, a team shouldn't do anything. To give you some numbers, internally, we have about 520 enterprise GitHub organizations using it, with more than 3,000 pipelines, and having, I need to look up the number, it's so high, 390,000 pipeline runs, active pipeline runs per month. That was the number of February. For these agnostic ready-mades, we don't really have a solution yet. We looked into Jenkins X, Jenkins X 2.0 DSL, which is, from my perspective, unfortunately deprecated, because that would have allowed us to do something like that. We were able to extend, replace certain stages, and provide a central flow in an easy to consume way. One could think of proprietary UDSL. Maybe some people would say it's not really a use case. The agnostic library is sufficient. At the moment, we don't really think so. And maybe it's something which could be a newer CDF project, new CDF Interop project. Having said that, further information there. And any questions from your end?
I asked the question in chat. I'll just repeat it. So are you using, does Piper use Jenkins pipelines as its underlying workflow mechanism and workflow engine?
Yes, for at least for these ready-made pipelines, right? For the centrally provided pipeline, it does. But if a team says we want to execute on GitHub Actions, for example, then there's no Jenkins involved, right? But then we cannot provide today these ready-mades, as we call it. We can only provide the individual steps, and also in the open source project itself, we're using our own binary to do certain things, using it with GitHub Actions underneath. But Jenkins is still the majority cases.
So to get the most benefit from Piper, meaning centrally centrally authored pipelines from, I'm gonna, please correct me, I'm maybe
Yes.
centrally authored pipelines, but then with local customizations to get that benefit, a team would have to be using Jenkins as their.
Today, yes.
Okay.
We're looking into how we can provide this for other orchestrators. Ideally in a orchestrator neutral format, right? We don't need to have all the nitty-gritty details an orchestrator has, but in the end, we would need to have some kind of flow definition and allowing to extending certain stages, replacing stages, and so on. And we don't have this yet.
And you would need to have something that interpolates something that's generic, generic definition to an actual, definition, sort of a adapter or plugin kind of a model. Yeah.
Right. And there we were looking into the Jenkins XDSL. We have a prototype running where we basically use the Jenkins XDSL with an adapter, creating then creating a Jenkins pipeline again, or creating a GitHub Actions workflow and so on.
So as you've indicated, the Jenkins X 2.0 DSL has essentially been deprecated in favor of Tekton. So the idea being that Tekton is, they're going behind the idea that Tekton's the best cloud native way, standardized way to represent your pipelines and task for continuous delivery. And that they want that to be the primary, they think that should be the primary DSL for developers and tools. That's an opinion where the Jenkins X project is at right now, but it may not be helpful for you. They've the Jameses have also done a really interesting blog post on interoperability with Jenkins X and Jenkins, and that may have ideas that are useful for you, since Piper is predominantly a works with Jenkins, but you're looking for, I guess, a more cloud native DSL. So that might be interesting. I'll put the links in the chat. But having said all that, actually it would be really interesting to have you have a collaboration with the Jenkins project. I feel like this should be, we could easily do like a blog post or something. There should be more. We should be doing something to promote this project, because it's definitely very interesting. I will have to ping you. I will follow up with you.
That's perfect. Yeah, and we had a talk at the DevOps World, at the last DevOps World, about this topic.
So perfect. Good.
And I proposed the Agnostic talk also for CDCon, which didn't get accepted for the early bird.
Yeah, but all the talks that were proposed for early bird, they're still in the applicant pool.
I
so
know.
it's not,
About the bullet point, our new CDF interop project. It's not interop project, but CDF project. Like, I don't know, like, because I am checking the website and the GitHub project. I think it's like there are lots of contributors. It looks like pretty, attractive project. So what do you mean with that? Like because like you donate the project to CDF, I think, in order for it to become a CDF project. Yeah. Do you mean that or something else?
No, first of all, what I meant, maybe there is it's a possibility for, if people believe that such a neutral DSL makes sense, that could be something to pick up, right? I know the Jenkins, talking to the Jenkins X project, as Kara, you just said, right? The guys are looking at Tekton. The Jenkins X approach is a little different. Teams need to update their local repository in case central changes take place. We would love to avoid this, because we have teams with more than 100 pipelines. That means having a change would have the impact for them to change 100 pipelines, right? And look into 100 pull requests or more, even more, and update those things.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking this, because like when we first proposed SIG interoperability, like a year ago or so, like one of the things people highlighted under pull request was like exactly DSL thing, you know. And now when you talk about DSL and the idea you presented, like it makes sense if you look at from that perspective. No, just, you know, remembered that discussion from pull request. That's why I asked, and your point there making a CDF project. But I don't know how things work to make a CDF project. We have Tracy Regan here. Maybe you can, you know, give few hints, because you went through that process for Ortelius recently.
Right. Yeah, maybe Tracy, before you go. From our end, it would also be a possibility to, for sure, be a possibility to donate, right? For sure, we need to clarify, but that can be an option, but that wasn't the option I mentioned, or I meant on the slide.
Okay.
Just to provide a little background and context on the generalization of a DSL for CD. This was, and Christy, if Christy was here, she could probably provide much more color on this. But I recall the early days of Tecton. This subject was heavily debated in that group. In fact, there was a proposal to not have Tecton's DSL be described as a CRD. So it would be described as something very generic. And then it could be interpolated into a CRD, which is, you know, totally Kubernetes specific, because, you know, Kubernetes, yes, is the main cloud native. It's a very dominant cloud native framework, but there are, believe it or not, there are other ones like Nomad from HashiCorp does a similar thing as Kubernetes does, but does it very differently. So anyway, but the point is, it was heavily debated, but at the end of the day, the consensus of the community was that it doesn't add anything to, if we're going to go, you know, full on Kubernetes cloud native, let's just create the DSL as a CRD and be done with it and not have to worry about generalizing it. So that's just something that was debated.
Yeah, and I guess that's absolute valid approach if you take Kubernetes as granted.
Exactly.
If you look at it from an angle that you have various orchestrator systems, maybe also GitHub Actions, then the DSLs are so different.
Yeah. So if I can add something, what we're still trying to do, we try to keep as much as possible Kubernetes specific bits out of the API. And also we started an effort to have a conformance document where we specify the API for Tecton, which the only implementation we have today for is the Kubernetes CRD, but it does not preclude the fact that there might be a different backend implementation for that. So we kind of have that still in our mind.
And maybe that's also a possibility, right? I looked into Tecton a bit every once in a while, not in too much detail. I'm not sure if it's possible today to have these kind of extensions on a repository side, right? That you have a centrally defined pipeline and a team says, I don't like this specific stage of of the centrally provided pipeline, but I want to add a step to it, add a task to it, or just completely replace it.
Yeah, that's a topic we're talking about a lot. It's not straightforward to do today. I mean, there are some approaches you could do. You could use certain templating engines on top to generate a pipeline, but to do it dynamically, one of the things that you could do today is to basically break down your pipeline in multiple pieces and use events to connect them. So you could have a core pipeline and then use events to trigger